What is up, everybody? It is Alex from Heavy New York calling from Zoom again, and this time we are here with Ben of Black Map. Thank you so much for coming on the show today. Great to finally have you on the show, too.
Happy to be here. Thanks so much.
Yeah, man, it's great to have you here. Funny little story about this channel in Black Map. I remember, you guys were doing the tour with Chevelle back in the day, and that was right when the channel, just started launching. So I think,
Right.
Black Map was one of the first bands that I was, inquiring about when you guys were, still on E1 back in the day or something like
Awesome.
that. So, it's great to finally make this happen. It's a kick-ass time to be able to speak with you with this new album Hex coming out. Was this meant to be just sort of like a follow-up to your previous record, or was Hex meant to be kind of like new uncharted territory, almost kind of like a new beginning for Black Map?
When we were writing it, I wasn't thinking about. I mean, every album's a new chapter, right? But it definitely is a lot different than our last record. I really enjoy our last record, Melodoria, but this one's just way more immediate, leaning more into punk rock than it does lean into more like psychedelic or ethereal music. There's still elements of that because of the way that our great guitar player Mark plays. But it's just a really immediate, just like 1, 2, 3, go record. All the songs are under 4 minutes, and it just goes. So I guess it's a new chapter. But anyone that's a fan of Black Map will recognize a lot of like the hallmarks of what we've been doing for a decade now.
Well, what I've always found fascinating is I've always said that Black Map is a very experimental band. I've never said that you guys were a hardcore band or a psychedelic rock band or I've always thought that Black Map was a band that always kept me in suspense and left us wondering what was happening next. Does it ever start with a vision in mind with the making of an album? Let's go in and be more hardcore over here. Let's go in and be more experimental here, or does it just kind of is it a very throwing paint at the wall and seeing what sort of sticks?
Yeah, it's more Jackson Pollock. I think that's kind of the beginning of the death of art is when you have a preconceived notion of what you should do, especially if you're doing it to fit within a certain genre. If something's sexy at the time musically and you're trying to adhere or glom onto that, it's generally not good and it's not appealing to me. So we weren't at all looking at what else was going on. We were just doing what we wanted to do, and the songs just kind of came out a certain way because of where we're at musically and where we're at in our lives. But yeah, there was no discussion before. There was a discussion after going, this record sounds a certain way.
Well, I'm pretty sure you get asked this a lot when you're talking to the press. A very common question artists get asked is this the music you've always wanted to make? Is this the vision? And a lot of times artists will say, yes, this was always what the band was supposed to be. This was always the vision we entailed. But when you guys put out, and we explode in 2014, there was no way you could possibly foresee what you would be putting out in 2025. We didn't know what the world would be like and how we would be influenced. So can you say that this is the record you've always wanted to make? Or is this just the perfect representation of who you and everybody in the band is at this particular time?
Yeah, I'd say the latter, but there's elements of well, what's on this record is the type of music. I mean, I've always loved. What I really try to do in this band, pretty much in every single song, is marry both like power and beauty together. I love heavy music, but I also love when it's beautiful. And the fact that I'm a songwriter, I get to try to make that. And I hope most of the time I achieve that. So that's what I've always been trying to do in this band, and I think we continued that element on this record.
Yeah, because and heavy is also such a very subjective term. I've heard people call Creed heavy before, and I'm not and a serious matter too. And I've seen people refer to and people would say that a band like Killswitch Engage is not heavy at all because there's melodic singing in it.
They're heavy. They're heavy.
Oh, 100%. So
yeah, I do think when we started, it was like only drop tuning, and we had a little bit more of a mission. I wouldn't even say a mission. It was just the way that the first record sounded was almost all very dropped, like to see a lot of chugga chugga va ba 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 ba. And it wasn't conscious, but we just did like move on a little bit from that. We still have a bunch of that, but we've just added other elements to our kind of repertoire.
Yeah. Would you say that those elements were rooted in like experience in a way? Like, is it like maybe a perfect reflection to represent what happened between you and Melodoria in a way, or was this like were you almost kind of like riff shopping as I call it, or like kind of like browsing through?
Mm. We all listen to so much different music, and I think people, I don't know if they'd be surprised or not, but like we listen to lots of super heavy music, and we love our Gojira and Sepulturas and our bands like that. But we listen to a lot of like ambient, weird, cool stuff, and so that's part of who we are. So with riff shopping, I don't know. I mean, when I demo things, I send them to the guys, and I basically say, at least on this last record, like, what do you think? And probably half the time it's like an emphatic thumbs up, and half the time it's like meh. And if the song's meh, we work on it a little bit more, and we kind of see if we can get it past that point. Um, so there is a lot of like riff shopping and throwing things around and seeing if we can hone them and make them better. Some things,
And,
you know, some things get through and some things don't.
And speaking of the evolution of your sound, because I mean, kind of circling back to last year, but like it was a turning point for Black Map because I would say I forgot if it was and We Explode or Driver, the EP that came out first. But I mean, I would imagine 2014 was the year that a good portion of us first heard of Black Map, in a way. So, what was the sort of mindset behind the making of your debut, and how would you say you're the same? How different has your perspective on yourself as an artist changed between then and now?
It's a good question. In the context of the band, I mean, there is always something extra exciting about making your very first record, right? Because there's nothing that's come before. So you're kind of figuring out like what you are and who you are. Um, it was a really exciting time, and I don't want to say we got lucky because we had all, we've been in bands forever and we had all paid our dues, but we put that out and we were on tour immediately with bands like Chevelle and then with Bush and Highly Suspect and Nothing More and some real like heavy hitters. That was a really like exciting time to be putting out music for us, but it's still exciting. I mean, I'm really excited about putting this record out in a couple days, and it still makes me, maybe I'm jaded in some ways, as every musician is, but I'm still really excited to put music out in the world and have people hear it.
Yeah, you have your whole life to make your first record, but you have the rest of your life to make it again. So,
Right.
Do you think that? Because I've always loved it when a band has a success story, like the debut is hitting the ground running, like an Appetite for Destruction or a Hybrid Theory or something like that. But then it's always great when a band, may like take a band like All That Remains, where like it wasn't until their third album that maybe people really started getting to know who they were, or I can think of a lot of other examples off the top of my head. But so, do you think it's better when the band hits the instant success mark, but then they're kind of like enslaved to their earlier work for the rest of their life, or do you think it is better when a band kind of has a little bit of trial and error earlier in their career and maybe put out like a relatively underwhelming first record before really hitting the cream of the crop?
Um, I'm sure it depends, but it'd be pretty awesome to have a debut record that absolutely smashes. I mean, because then you have so many opportunities at your disposal. And it's kind of then, in that situation, you can kind of choose your own adventure. If you're going to keep making great music or if you're going to be like a slave to the industry. But yeah, I mean, I wish that had happened for us. It didn't exactly, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, no point of complaining if you put out a record as successful as Appetite for Destruction, but there is a part where, like, their entire life, I'd imagine that when they were, like, playing Use Your Illusion stuff, like, people were saying, oh, when are you going to play Welcome to the Jungle? When are you going to play It's So Easy? So.
I saw that they just opened up their show with Welcome to the Jungle. It's a pretty ballsy move to open up with that tune. Pretty awesome.
Why would that be ballsy? That's an opening track to a show if I've ever heard one.
Yeah, well, I just when a band opens up with arguably their most famous song, I think is ballsy.
Yeah, no, they got plenty of other very famous songs that they could end with. But I see your point. How do you know when you're exactly finished with a song? Because you say so much in just one. So how do you know when you need to stop adding stuff in or when you need to stop editing it? How do you can you say that this song said everything you needed to say?
Lyrically, that's not particularly difficult for me. I kind of know when the story's over. And also in the context of like a 3.5 or 4 minute song, it's like there's only so much time. So you have to figure out to be concise when you need to be. Musically, I think we like adding layers on records, but we also want to make sure it's something that we can play live and feel comfortable playing live. And we really don't like using tracks. We have a couple little ambient things that come through on tracks every now and then, but we're just not one of those bands that ever wants to rely on that. So I think that sets up some limitations in the studio going, okay, it'd be cool to add this sitar here or this, whatever, horns or something. But are we going to be able to pull that off, every night on the road? No. So that's a good way for us to set limitations and not go too crazy adding tons of stuff.
Would you consider like Black Map to be like a very like would Hex be considered a concept album in a way? And like would you almost like have has lyrical ideas determined or the concept maybe determined or guided your hand with regards to how the music would be made?
So no, it's not necessarily a concept album. I mean, you could listen to it and find certain conceptual lines that go through it, and I can. So I could say it's a concept album because I know some of the concepts that are intertwined in every song, but I didn't set out to write it that way. And I've thought about doing an album that kind of tells a linear story. Maybe that'll be the next album or something, but I haven't really done that yet consciously.
Has there or depending on what the material is about, if it's more from like a personal place or if it's more of like an external source of inspiration, does it resonate with you differently, or do you maybe channel a different energy into that song, or does that maybe even like affect on how you play your instrument with it too?
Doesn't affect how I play the instrument, but there's different ideas. Like we have a song, two songs on this record, unfortunately, that are about like friends that passed, and those are very emotional songs for me. But then there are songs like for first record, I'm Just the Driver, that is still one of my favorite songs of ours. But that's like from a perspective of like essentially like a mob boss's, like employee that sees all these nefarious things happening, and so that's not something I like really experienced in my life, right? So yeah, there's a different like feeling when I play that song because I'm not necessarily emotionally tied to that story, but I don't think you'd ever see anything different in the way we play it or perform it.
Yeah, because in the end, it is still music coming from you and your fellow bandmates. So in the end, there's always going to be an umbrella that everything sort of falls under, right?
Absolutely.
Now, whenever a band says that we all mutually came together and it was all such an organic, agreeing process, I don't really believe it because if you're in a band, whether it's a trio or you're in a band with 9 members like it's Slipknot, there's going to be some disagreement and there's going to be different perspectives and different ideas all coming together. So, and with all the different sounds incorporated in Black Map too, I think it's fair to say that a lot of people, that everybody in the band has their own plethora of inspirations that they incorporate, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. We, like I said earlier, with some of my demos, if I write something, I send it to them. They're two of my best friends in the world, and we really do have a good rapport. I don't feel offended if they don't like something, but I do try to kind of push it to see them. Okay, then let's get in a room and let's try to suss it out. But it's honestly been pretty smooth sailing as far as the creative element of this band. The clashes that we have, they aren't that bad, and we tend to try to like figure out a way around them. If someone's passionate about a part, we try to figure out how to make it work. And a good thing about having a three-piece is the odd number is at 2 votes. You'll never have a mutiny because it'll either be unanimous or it'll be 2-1. So it can be easier to get through. Than if you're a 4-piece or a 6-piece.
That's actually a really good. That was the best marketing campaign like, hey, if you're gonna start a band, make it a trio. Like, be like
Right.
Nirvana, be like Black Mat.
Yeah.
But you played with a variety of different bands too. I mean, playing from with a band like Circus Survive, or playing with a band like Chevelle versus playing with a band like Bush, and then you played with a band like Highly Suspect. So, have you noticed maybe different reactions to your sound depending on who you're playing with, and also do you maybe like adjust your set list depending on the tour package that you're on?
Yeah. Um, yeah, if you're on tour with a band like Circus Survive, and you have like the ambient stuff that we have, you might lean into that. And then if we're out with, Chevelle or Nothing More, might lean into the heavier stuff. But there's like five songs we're gonna play at every single show, whether we're opening up for, you know, Dave Matthews or we're opening up for Metallica. We're gonna play, we're gonna do what we do, and there's only so far that we can adjust the set because we are who we are. But yeah, we might make little tweaks depending on who we're supporting.
Yeah, because I could see you doing like a tour. I think you have like a great like classic rock sound that I could see you open up for Metallica or Guns N' Roses or Dave Matthews. But then I could also maybe see you do a tour with like Sleep Token. That's way
Yeah.
very experimental. And then even for like the prog fans, I could see you on tour with like an Opeth or a Dream Theater in that regard.
Yeah, we've never done that. I'd be open to it and see how it goes. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, because I've always thought like that, and I'm not saying it like it's a bad thing, but like touring with bands like Nothing More or Chevelle, they definitely, I would say, lean more towards the mainstream sound. And I remember like listening to you guys and almost being like kind of like happy but like surprised. I was like, wow, I thought that they would be like on a tour with like more of like an experimental band. Like for example, if you played me a Black Map, like a couple Black Map songs for the first time, and they say, "What band could you see this band touring with?" I probably would have resorted to like maybe like a Primus or something like that.
That would be fun.
Depending on the type of atmosphere that you're playing in too, or like the type of venue, if you're playing in like a smaller place versus a larger place, is that a different Black Map experience altogether as well?
Yeah, it kind of cuts both ways because like you love playing, we love playing, huge places. If we're blessed to be opening up for a gargantuan band somewhere, it's a lot of fun, but you can feel a little disconnected from the audience. Um, but you're still grateful to be there. Whereas like last weekend we did a couple shows in Sacramento and in San Francisco at uh, relatively small venues and packed them, and that's a much more intimate experience. So yeah, it kind of goes both ways. I enjoy doing both.
Do you think that being that also Black Map, every member came from other projects involved, that also sort of like that experience in your previous ideas also helped kind of influence, or when the formation of the band, you kind of just wanted to like keep the past and start fresh?
Well, none of us were running away from anything from our other projects, and we all have so much respect for them, and they all shaped us and made us, how we are. So we all talk about our old bands um, and hold them all, in high regard. Because we sound the way we do because of all the past experiences we've had.
Yeah, it wasn't like were you guys like trying to combine elements of Far and elements of Dredge and kind of like sandwich it, or
Again, we never discussed that, but of course that's going to happen because the way Chris plays drums and the way Mark plays guitar. So it was never a discussion. We really hardly ever sat down and said, "Let's be this." We kind of we do it, and we know we're gonna fit in somewhere because it's rock and roll. It's vocals and guitar, bass and drums, and but we never set out to make it a specific thing.
and as you shouldn't. I think the fact that you don't set out to do a specific thing, I think definitely helps with the experimental sound that you have. So
Cool.
before we go, I want to thank you so much for your time. Feels so good to finally have Black Map on the show. Is there just anything else with the release of Hex that we could be expecting in the near future, if you are allowed to say at this time, of course?
Um, there'll be a couple really awesome show announcements soon, but I can't say them yet. And yeah, the record's out on May 9th, and we're just really excited for y'all to hear it. So
Yeah,
that's it. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm excited for the rest of the world to hear this album too. This is kick ass. This album, when you open up with Disintegrate and you end with Fake Your Own Life, I mean, just it is an absolute adventure of a listen. So excellent work, everybody. We are here with Black Map. Be sure to check out Hex on May 9th. We will see you next time on Heavy New York.